All right, I think we are ready to go. So, my name is Adrian Bodrement, and I'm a Senior Research Manager at CIRIA. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is all about the new guidance documents that we are just publishing around enabling community maintenance for local flood risk management. Um, before I start, before we actually go into the topic, a few housekeeping slides. Um, I mean, we know the drill by now, but still, just so you know, this webinar is being recorded. You are in listening mode only. You can, if you want to participate in the conversation, there's a few things you can do. You can raise your hand, and that would be for technical issues, and then you can use the chat to communicate those issues. But then we would like you to participate via the Q&A. So on my screen, I don't know about yours, but the Q&A is actually hidden into the More button. So if you want to head over the More button, and in there you will see the Q&A, and this is where we want to receive your questions, so we can organize them and respond to them. If you see a question that you like, you can add a thumbs up to convey that you agree with the question and that you would like to hear a response to it. All right. Um, we we're going to share some resources in the chat. So this is where we're going to post some links and also the bios for the speakers today. Then, if you want to share your views and experiences on LinkedIn, you have a few hashtags there that you can use. And stay until the end, you will receive the CPD poll. Okay. So, a little bit about CIRIA. For those of you who don't know who we are the Construction Industry Research and Information Association. We've been around for quite some time. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary, and we are a not-for-profit member-based organization. Our core strength is to improve performance of the construction industry through collaboration. And we do this through our guidance document, but also networking events and committees of practice. And we also organize around 50 events per year. Here is a snapshot of our membership. So we are really proud to cover the full spectrum of the construction industry, from academia all the way to tier one contractors and the people actually implementing and building solutions on the ground. The outputs that we produce, as I mentioned, we are well known for our guidance. I have a few here on screen. These are like the SETS manual, the natural flood management manual as well, and the very recent one that we published a couple of weeks ago, which is about greening coastal infrastructure through eco-engineering. So we do touch on many different topics within CIRIA. We have our communities of practice, which are dedicated membership-based subgroups where we explore in more details some key topics. Drain for sustainable drainage, everything SUDS, build-off sites, but we also have one on soil and one on biodiversity within the built environment. Then we also have tools. The latest one is CIRIA Best, which is an online benefit estimation tool, very useful to compare a work as usual versus implementing blue and green infrastructure. Now, we have a very packed agenda today. So very briefly, this is the overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about the guidance as a very high level, and then we will hear from the authors. On the policy side of things, then we'll hear about some of the maintenance activities that can be done for community groups. how community groups can support flood resilience, and then we'll hear about some case studies. So this will be a very interesting set of presentations, all that leading to a Q&A session. So it is very important, please, that you put in your questions into the Q&A box. With me today, I'm really thrilled to have a set of speakers. Um, we will hear from Claire Twigoros and Jonathan Sim, both, and Emma Thompson. So Claire and Jonathan are part of the author team. Emma is part of the steering group. Alan from National Flood Forum was also part of the author team. The National Flood Forum was. And Clive from the Hannis Flood Group for a more practical example. So let's take a quick look at the guidance documents. First of all, the context. Um, I just extracted one quote from the pitch review published back in 2008 following the devastating flood that happened. And this is around providing better advice and help for people to protect their families and homes, as well as working together and sharing information. And I think this is what this set of guidance is trying to achieve for the advice side of things, but also very importantly, the sharing of information, communication, working together aspect of things. And then here I have also that community groups are already doing maintenance activities, and that was highlighted in a series of surveys that we did when we were starting the work on those documents. You will learn more about those surveys later on in the presentations. I would like to start with recognizing the funders that you can see on the top right corner here. Uh, this is how we do CIRIA guidance document. We go via the industry, we fundraise via the industry. And so a big thank you to our funding organizations here. So we can see the EA, FloodRay, Heatingdon County Council, via the Thames RFCC, Network Rail, Severn Trent, Thames Water. Then we've put a team together, which was selected via a competitive tender. And the lead author is HR Wallingford. And then part of the author team, we have UNOMIA, the Flood Hazard Research Center from Middlesex University, Alberton University, and the National Flood Forum. Lastly, you can see that there was a wide interest into this project, and this interest was grouped within a project steering group that had a chance to take a look at everything that was produced and add their thoughts and examples and expertise to that. So you can see that we have a wide set of different type of organizations, from water companies to local authorities and flood volunteer representatives. So that was a very vibrant steering group, and the guidance document that was produced is the reflection of that. A bit of definition and background. You're going to hear that throughout the presentation, but when we started on the work, we wanted to make sure that we all started with a common understanding of what we were trying to achieve. So throughout the documents, we've defined community maintenance as activities that by flood action groups or other volunteers affiliated to communities like parish, town, villages, designed to observe, monitor, maintain, or sustain the performance of flood defenses, channels, and drainage works. Something that was really clear when we started this work is that we wanted to make sure that those activities remain the responsibilities of the risk management authorities or other statutory or regulated bodies or the owner of the assets. Really want to point out that this is not offsetting any responsibilities towards the communities, but rather this is about if the communities want to do some work and only if they want to do so, then this series of guidance documents can provide them with the tools to do so in a safe manner. So in a sentence, it's community maintenance working with and guided by the relevant authorities that can make a real difference. At the end of the project, these are the three outputs. So it's a series. And the first one is called Taking Action, Reducing the Risk of Flooding for Your Community by Maintaining Drainage, Watercourses, and Flood Defenses. And this one was written specifically for flood groups and local communities. So this is the main document. It has everything from how to start a group, how to sustain it, who to talk to, who to engage with, and of course, what type of activities, what type of assets are around you, what can be done, and if so, how to do those activities safely. The second document is geared towards the risk management authorities. And this is about how to engage and how to support community groups that do want to do some maintenance activities of flood risk management assets. And the third document is a brief, very short document on tracing a line on existing policies that talk about how to engage with volunteers and local groups around maintenance activities. And it also talks about why it could be very beneficial to have a very fruitful relationship between risk management authorities and community groups and how that can result in better flood resilience. This document is picture driven. There's a lot of examples in there, and it was all derived from the learnings of groups that are actually doing those activities as of today. So it's all very much grounded into what groups are doing. Those three documents have a different color code, but they are all available online on the CIRIA bookstore, and they are free to download. So if you want to get a copy of those, all you need to do is to head out to ciria.org, and once you've located the document, you can just log in with your account, which is free to create, and then you can download those for free. Okay, now I would like to introduce the first speaker, and this is Claire Twigger-Ross, Principal Consultant at Eunomia Research and Consulting. And Claire is gonna talk about the policy side of things, and I will hand it over to Claire.
Great. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you very much, Adrian. It's really good to be here. I'm going to talk briefly, as Adrian said, about the policy context for this guidance. And it's taken from the briefing note for staff in risk management authorities who might be thinking of supporting community maintenance of FRM assets. As he said, the note traces a line through relevant policy and regulatory documents, making the case for sensitive implementation. I'm just going to revisit the definition. And highlight some key words and how we define them going through the project. So first, the activities. We had a categorization of 4 types: knowledge, campaign, physical and virtual focused. And we anticipate that the emphasis in this work will be on physical focused and virtual focus. It could be in the knowledge category, or, as I say, in the virtual category. So it could be observation, it could be checking data from sensors. And obviously groups may well be involved in wider activities, but that's the kind of focus for this guidance, the physical maintenance work. Volunteers affiliated with communities. The focus is on people who are volunteering out to help out in their local community, and that the activities are affiliated to some local community structures in some way. That might be through a parish council or a local neighbourhood group. And finally, the emphasis is on flood defences, channels and basins, and on inland FRM assets only. And these are the types of assets included. And in both the guidance documents, it talks about the type of assets that are included and what's not included. So we thought it's quite important really to lay out that land right at the beginning. So in terms of, I want to briefly go over the policy, strategy and practical drivers for this work. As part of the work, we reviewed documents listed here, and a number of aspects come quite clear. Firstly, there's been an increased emphasis on whole of society approach to resilience that's set out in the UK Resilience Framework. And since the Pitt Review, which is now, from 2008, there has been an increased emphasis on the involvement of communities in flood risk management. Thirdly, there are references to partnership working in specific areas, nature-based solution, understanding risks, emergency planning. And fourthly, there is an endorsement of the role of flood volunteers. For example, the FCRM strategy roadmap from the Environment Agency 2022 highlights collaboration between communities prepared and the National Flood Forum to enable volunteer flood groups to grow and take a more active role in managing flood and coastal resilience in their local communities. And finally, there is a direct reference to maintenance in the recent EA 2024 guidance on ownership of watercourses for setting up a community partnership when an asset is no longer being maintained. So what we can see through all these different documents is really this line and policy context within which this guidance sits. Moving on to some more strategic and practical guidance drivers. At the more strategic level, there has been a continued social turn, which is reflected on in academic literature, a move towards greater emphasis on social processes, with citizens volunteering alongside emergency responders, but also engaging in planning for adaptation, as well as engaging with RMAs on maintenance of assets. And this move towards proactive engagement, resilience rather than just reactive in the emergency, is also reflected in the way the National Flood Forum works with communities to support local collaborative planning, as well as dealing with emergency responses. And practically, there are reasons why people are getting engaged. They see a need. There are limited resources within risk management authorities, and certain assets will not be maintained. Community members often form groups because that public funding isn't available to maintain an asset. And unsurprisingly, a key catalyst for many people is a flood, which raises the profile of the need to prevent further flooding and increase resilience, and maintenance can play a part of that. Finally, there are changes in the types of FRM approaches that point to greater community involvement. And for example, the increasing numbers of sustainable urban drainage systems, which are being adopted to manage surface water within urban areas. So what are the ways in which communities are participating? As Adrian said, we carried out some research as part of this guidance development, and many of you will be aware of this, participation varies, but three categories we discerned. One is the community-led direct action self-help groups, which is maybe specifically focused on maintenance. There are the strategic involvement in perhaps in getting engaged with supporting natural flood management measures being implemented, and then local flood groups working with councils as part of their wider engagement in flood risk management, which may involve maintenance. There are different governance arrangements in place. Some we observed are working alongside wildlife charities, conservation charities, so working on co-benefits for both wildlife and also flood risk reduction. Might be a flood group that is linked to a parish council, so it's under the auspices of a parish council, or it could be that flood groups are more informally liaising with local councils. So this new guidance is focused on formalising those relationships and structures to support community action. And the types of opportunities that we're thinking about for communities, specific local flood assets that might be owned by risk management authorities, That's the Environment Agency, Lead Local Flood Authority, District Council, Inland Drainage Board, Water and Sewerage Company. It could be where a maintenance has been withdrawn, or an orphaned asset where ownership is not known or no responsibility has been assumed. And this is distinguished from work that a riparian owner, that's someone whose property is adjacent to a water body, would do. And the focus is really on community action rather than supporting a riparian owner unless they were unable to carry out that maintenance themselves. And finally, it's a question that quite often comes up around liabilities and insurance. So we had a look at this and did some thinking. There are issues that are often raised that might be concerns around damage that might occur directly because of maintenance activity, personal injury to volunteers, or flooding that might result as from maintenance activity ceasing or being carried out incorrectly. There isn't any direct information directly relating to this within current policy or guidance, and whether or not a group is prepared to or should undertake activities without insurance will, of course, depend on the activities undertaken. What we did find is that some groups get insurance from conservation volunteers, or they may be covered by parish council insurance. And this is likely, though, to be limited perhaps to working with handheld tools, and groups might then look for expertise elsewhere to bring in if certain equipment's needed by those people who have that relevant insurance. And groups should be doing risk assessments to look at health and safety, and also the guidance provides information thinking around health and safety and also the liabilities and insurance. So I think on that area we feel it's not an insurmountable issue, but obviously needs careful consideration. And that's all I wanted to say really about the general policy and practice context. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Claire. Really nice presentation. So I would like now to introduce our next speaker. So we're going to hear from Jonathan Sim, Technical Director, Flood and Water Management at HR Wallingford. And Jonathan will be talking about maintenance measures for community groups to undertake. Jonathan, all yours.
Thank you, Adrian. So Claire has given me a good introduction to my presentation this morning. I just wanted to mention that one of the things in the outset was that we agreed at the beginning with the project steering group that it would be really important to have some underlying principles that the whole team agreed on before moving into this work. And these are not academic principles, which I did some work for my own research a few years ago, so that described by the diagram on the right-hand side, where we see the tension between the positive desire to, for people to look after, steward their place and be part of their local community, against the tensions of increasing flood risk and what Claire has already mentioned, the lack of funding in some cases. So those are obviously at a deeper level underlying principles, but these were more, we thought we needed some more practical principles that would guide what the approach of community groups and flood risk management authorities in thinking about this topic area. So these are listed on the left-hand side of the slide. So the first thing is you've got to be specific and you've got to be realistic about the local flood risk management situations. So in other words, if you think about the principle 3 there, you've got to be, what you're undertaking has got to be relevant, and you've actually got to be able to carry it out with the resources and skills that you've got available. As part of that, it's really important to work together and communicate with others outside of the flood group. And we'll hear a lot about that, I'm sure, during the course of this morning. Caring for the local environment goes hand in hand with flood risk management. And as Claire has already mentioned, it's really important to be proactive in managing risks to health and safety of the community group members and other risks that may be relevant. And then not to forget about it is that there is a risk that the community groups can be a bit short-lived if there's not a clear vision for how the community group could move on into the future. And so we do give some guidance on how to sustain and evolve the group as time goes on. So we take people through, I'm not going to go through this flowchart in any detail here, but we just go through in the course of the guidance, we go through the planning process that the groups would need to undertake and how they would need to interact with the risk management authorities in planning out what they're going to do, find out whether they need any consents, make sure they've got any necessary low-level funding that they need for materials or equipment, and then organize themselves with the volunteers, materials, insurance, and so on. So there's the whole planning process. Then the doing of the work itself, whether that be inspection, observations, or monitoring as agreed, and then moving that, using that to define the maintenance and rehabilitation work that might be undertaken. And then a check, a looping back to check that everything is going okay, what needs to be redone, what isn't working, and so on. So we run through all of that in the community guidance. And in the RMA guidance, we sort of explain how that should be supported. So we mentioned that that we carried out a survey of over 70 individuals who were involved in different groups, and that led to a categorization of the primary activities that people were undertaking. So debris litter removal, unfortunately, comes quite high up on that. Vegetation management on land and in water, and that can be quite varied: grass cutting, woody vegetation management, invasive species management, and even some planting. And then in water, you've got to worry about algal blooms and floating and rooted vegetation. Some silt and sediment removal in bulk, that may involve working with local landowners if excavators or something like that is needed. Removal of blockages from screens to pipes and culverts, and then what you do about what arises in terms of waste management. Top activities that came out of the survey were removal of natural debris and rubbish, and and a lot of effort in inspection and reporting. And then alongside that, vegetation management, both in land and water, and sediment and silt removal. So what we do is we run through there's a part B and a part C to the community guidance. So there's a general activities that apply to more than one asset type of structure or asset. Are covered in a general way first. And so, for example, the vegetation management chapter explains the when, why, and how of grass and weed management, vegetation management, water, woodlands, and then algal blooms and invasive plants. But in addition, there is guidance in other parts of the document on managing watercourses, because obviously that's a big place where we find vegetation, working with wildlife, waste management, and obviously inevitably health and safety. So that's the types of activities. What about the types of assets that are being maintained? Well, a lot of the work that's going on is in watercourses. That was by far and away the largest activity. asset that was being maintained. But then alongside that, pipes and culverts and trash screens. The trash screens are a big part of, can be a big part of blockages in lengths of watercourses. So just on that latter subject, just what about some do's and don'ts which are mentioned in the guidance? Always check and liaise with the RMA and get approval if it's needed. Only remove things remove debris if it's accessible and the water levels are low enough to allow it. Don't do it during flood conditions. Get the right equipment. It's worth getting the right rakes and tines to actually remove screens, because they're all slightly different. And it's also worth monitoring screens that may block, so you can get advance warning of when something is going wrong. But certainly don't enter in pipes and culverts or enclosed spaces, or enter watercourses during high flow water level conditions, or even try to repair damaged structures. Here's a couple of examples that we found during our work. The manhood group here did essentially found that there were two problems. One was insufficient drainage in their area, and also a problem with a lack of water voles. And they found that by digging out relic ponds and reinstating them, they could kill two birds with one stone and reduce flood risk and increase water vole habitat and hence water voles. And interestingly, with this, there was some project funding that helped this, but they had found other ingenious ways of getting funding. So they'd exchange activities with a local landowner, perhaps, to get some of this work done. And that's a rural example, and here's an urban example where streetscape beautiful rain gardens were installed as part of a project by Waltham Forest Borough Council. So the initial work was all done by the council's contractors, but they worked with the community group, and who are now carrying out the monitoring of individual rain gardens. So they've divided them up amongst themselves, and they've got different tips and tricks to enable them to do the work out what's weed and what's plant, and ways of finding funding if they need something outside of what they've already got available. And then another question that came up in the course of thinking about this was, what about asset rehabilitation? And so asset rehabilitation is going a step beyond maintenance, and it's not. We had to think very carefully about whether or not that was appropriate to suggest as being suitable for a community group to undertake. And we found, that there were things that lay either side of that line. So, for example, yes, you could consider removing large woody vegetation. You could consider planting new vegetation. With embankments, it's not something that normally community groups undertake, but it is possible for them to deal with just local depressions and rutting, just to avoid perhaps local low spots or channels that may channeling down the side of the embankments that may cause erosion. Then activities to be avoided would be any kind of modifications to flow control structures, large scale silt or sediment removal, and definitely any flood embankment widening and raising. And so there's a table and some guidance on how to think through those, whether those activities or should be undertaken or not. Here's an example actually where sort of maintenance and rehabilitation kind of cross over with one another. So many of you will be aware of the approaches that are being used for natural flood management. The Martok group initially worked with the Wildlife Advisory Group and National Trust to put in some leaky dams to slow the flow, and have done a lot of that. But the issue that they've encountered is that when heavy rainfall events, there's a risk that these dams can be washed away, and so the group has now sort of moved back, as it were, from actively putting in new structures to not clearing natural dams that form in water channels. So, you know, it's not always completely clear cut when it comes to rehabilitation as to whether or not that's something you should a group should undertake. And it's the key message here is to work with the local partners and agree what's practical and learn from experience. Claire mentioned in her presentation about the you know, the policy drivers as well as some practical drivers for risk management authorities to support groups. So I'm not going to run over the policy, repeat what she said about the policy drivers, but in talking to risk management authorities, some of the themes that came out as suggesting why it was so worthwhile working with these community maintenance groups were just the simple development of long-term relationships and the mutual understanding that comes out of working together on a regular basis, reducing any misunderstandings. And then there's a two-way flow of knowledge. It's not just one way, but the risk management authorities can gain knowledge from community groups, i.e. with a lot knowledge of where the water goes locally, and then the community can understand from the RMA the bigger picture around flood risk management in their area. And then, you know, making sure that by working and thinking together, the actions that the group identifies are appropriate, not modifying as Adrian made clear right from the beginning that we're not modifying official responsibilities, but it does help the problems to be jointly solved and identifies which bit of the picture the group is best placed to focus on. Timeliness of action is an important thing. You know, the groups are on the ground, they can see things happening and can respond much more quickly. And RMAs, you know, it's voluntary activity, but sometimes there's a need for seed corn funding to provide support either on materials or equipment. And it's important that the group feels supported in all of that. And Claire's already mentioned about, you know, the mitigating risks and liabilities on with insurance or other approaches. I just quote this example from North Worcester Water Management Organisation, funded by 3 councils, and they felt that the community maintenance groups added value by 2 main things. One was coordinating activities of various riparian owners, and then who might otherwise just work in isolation and in an uncoordinated way. And secondly, by assisting those unable to manage the tasks themselves for whatever reason, either financial or physical. And so, and that particular organisation didn't see the community group as doing work on behalf of the council, but engaging with the council in a dialogue, a pragmatic approach. So in the second document that Adrian mentioned, which I'm only going to touch on briefly here, but essentially what we lay out is a process guidance for the risk management authorities. And it's important that it's understood that both involves internal processes, making sure that there's a coordinated approach within the risk management authority, and indeed what the aspirations are for the risk management authority with regard to the community group, and then setting up any necessary consenting processes or funding routes. And externally, obviously, not only coordinating with the community groups, but with any other partners, water companies, highways agencies, whatever it might be. Community groups find it really distressing when they've got to talk to so many different people, and maybe feeling that they may not be necessarily always joined up. Helping those groups to identify actionable activities and providing them with training if they're able to do so. Very important to have a mechanism to escalate issues from the community group to the risk management authority. The community group comes across something they feel they just can't tackle and shouldn't tackle. There must be a mechanism to escalate that issue. And then, just helping the group without trying to control them, but just to evaluate how effective and efficient they are, and just encourage them to have a long-term future. So thank you very much. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jonathan, for this deep dive into the document. This is really, really useful. I think in the chat box at some point you will find a link to directly access those documents on the CIRIA website. So keep an eye on that. It will pop up shortly. But in the meantime, let's hear from our next speaker, Alan Juan, Head of Engagement at the National Flood Forum, who's going to present on how community groups, new and existing, can support flood resilience. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you, Adrian. Good morning, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be able to speak to you today. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit about empowering communities through flood resilience, and I want to touch on 3 key areas, really. So I want to talk about just an introduction to the NFF for those that are not aware of us and our work. I want to talk about how the NFF can support the guidance process that's been designed here, and how the communities themselves can become more resilient and build their own support mechanisms. So just to really briefly touch on the National Flood Forum. National Flood Forum is a charity. We operate across England and Wales. Scotland has its own flood forum, Scottish Flood Forum, up there based in Edinburgh. We're a neutral and we're a trusted partner that focuses on people-led flood solutions, established in 2002 out of a village in Worcestershire called Bewdley after they suffered some flooding. The community group there organised the first flood action group, and the National Flood Forum was born out of that. We run projects now all over the country. We've got 23 members of staff. We've had a bit of a boom over the last 3 years, certainly, where we've gone from 7 or 8 members of staff up to 23, and there's more and more projects needing our support, more and more communities needing our support as well. And a lot of our funding comes from local authorities who ask us to come and do some of the community engagement work that they would like. So what do? We support individuals via our helpline and our flood recovery service. I'll talk a little bit about our flood recovery service shortly. Our helpline is staffed by some people who've got vast experience in flooding. Last year, we had over 1,000 phone calls on our helpline, and this year we're on track to receive over 1,200 phone calls through our helpline. So it really is a key frontline service that we operate. We help to form and sustain flood action groups, with the end goal being that they are self-sufficient, and that they, and I'll talk a little bit about flood action groups and what they do shortly. But essentially, we facilitate dialogue between communities and authorities. I mentioned the flood recovery services there. What we've got is a big open van, which we run into communities after working with local authorities, and we'll go in there traditionally a little while after the flooding subsided and people have done their own recovery. We'll go into that community and provide our own recovery services. But essentially, and one of the other things that we do is we advocate for flooded people at all levels. And if I can just talk about that for a little minute, the National Flood Forum is the secretariat for the APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group. We also are part of the Flood Resilience Task Force, and we're a part of some of the subcommittees that are about community resilience in that area. We have our own internal projects as well. We've got a Flooded Peoples Panel, which is a group of people from all over England and Wales who've got lived experience, who help us to shape our direction in our organisation, and they meet on a regular basis. We also operate webinars on a regular basis, usually every month or every couple of months, on different individual topics, where we have guest speakers come in and talk about very, very specific agenda items. So empowering community resilience, we help communities to understand their local flood risk. We want to build their confidence to engage with agencies. I'm sure you can imagine after or even before a flood, local communities can often be quite nervous about engaging with flood risk authorities. So we help them to build their confidence to be able to do that. We organise and lead some of the resilience efforts that are happening in local communities as well. But we want to make sure that resilient communities are informed, connected and active. You've heard a little bit about flood action groups, as the other speakers, Claire and Claire's mentioned earlier. A flood action group is effectively a community-led group that we support to set up, that empowers communities to be able to work with local authorities, Environment Agency, for example, water companies, flood risk managers, etc. And the purpose of those is to represent the community. So a flood action group speaks on behalf of a community, with the ultimate goals of improving communications between local authorities and communities, the ability to organise responses to flooding. We provide the community engagement aspect for a lot of the local authorities, as I mentioned earlier, but we support to do a lot of the problem solving that happens in local communities, emergency planning for future. So we build emergency plans alongside the community, and we want to support them in maintaining some of the assets that we've talked about today. And we do a lot of bridging the gap. So we translate a lot of the technical languages. I'm sure you can imagine there's a lot of modelling goes on when flooding happens, a lot of modelling in terms of what the future plans are going to be. So we support communities by translating some of that language and supporting their priorities. We support with government and agency consultations. I'm sure you'll be aware, or a lot of people will be aware of the reforming flood funding consultation that's out at the moment. We're supporting a number of community groups with their responses, and helping communities and agencies to understand each other better is also an important part of that. We get involved in co-designing property resilience and NFM projects, and ultimately we want to foster collaboration and achieve better outcomes. There's a lot of other things that we want to do around supporting community maintenance and guidance. Our abilities lie in mobilising and empowering communities and providing facilitation. We're a trusted mediator in a lot of conversations that happen between flood risk authorities and communities. So we do a lot of bridging the gap there, and we also provide a feedback loop between communities and flood risk management authorities. Promoting best practice is a big part of that as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of the advocacy work in terms of APPG, task resilience, and that kind of thing. So what can we do? So the National Flood Forum in supporting community guidance, as I mentioned there, we are the trusted mediator for a lot of communities and flood risk managers. So we're the connectors. We link communities together and provide national guidance efforts. We're facilitators. Our project officers are hugely talented in terms of facilitating meetings between communities and flood risk authorities, and that involves a lot of work behind the scenes, building trust and helping to negotiate practical solutions. We're supporters, so we offer a bit of capacity building and insurance advice, particularly through our helpline. And Jean, who I think might be on the call, is incredibly talented and knowledgeable in that area. We're amplifiers, as I mentioned. We elevate community voices through lived experience and storytelling. We want to amplify people with lived experience, what they've been through, the emotional distress that they've often been through, and work with local authorities to help each other to understand each other better. And we're also evaluators, so tracking community impacts and sharing best practice is really, really important to us. Now, we know that a lot of communities can be involved in supporting this guidance, so we want to support them to do. What we know is that a lot of flooding doesn't get reported, so we want to promote reporting of flood events so that it's recognised and that something can be done about it. There is an awful lot of flooding that doesn't get reported in that area. We want to build local knowledge, and we want communities to build local knowledge. So that's about the communities themselves sharing their local flood history in many cases. Also joining or even forming a flood action group can support in that effort. We also want collaboration between authorities and communities in terms of monitoring and maintenance, again, which fits into this into the guidance that we're talking about today. And we want communities to be able to shape the local plans that are enacted through that. So not just for CIRIA members, but for anybody really, what I think the National Flood Forum wants to promote is that through any flood defences and through any engagement that communities engage at the earliest possible stage, they have got voices and they have got lived experience, and they can use their local knowledge in many of the designs that are out there and wanting to be implemented. But we also want to promote social value through flood resilience. So just a couple of final thoughts from me. So flooding is a human challenge. The communities that we talk to are hugely impacted by flooding, both physically in terms of their properties, but also in terms of their emotional and mental health. Empowering communities is vital to effective flood risk management. As I said, they've got incredibly loud voices and ones that should be heard in planning for anything that comes down the line in future. But thank you so much for listening. Please put any questions in the Q&A section as mentioned before. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks a lot for this presentation. Okay, we are doing great on time, so I am thrilled. Which means it is now time to hear from our next speaker, Clive Menville, chairman of the Haynes Flood Group, who is going to share a case study demonstrating community maintenance in action. Clive, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Hey, we can see you and we can hear you. Perfect.
First time I've been called an action man. However, right, why do we have a flood group in Hanny? Well, you can see from these photographs, rather extensive flooding. And we had it 2 years running. Same weekend, around the 20th of July. It's coming up for the anniversary, and we've got rain in the forecast for this coming weekend. So fingers crossed. Why did it happen? Well, essentially, it had rained in May, June, and July, all over Oxfordshire. The fields were saturated, the ditches were full, and as you can see here, the ditches were all blocked. The water had nowhere to go. It's a floodplain, flat area, and the water just spilled out onto the roads and into the houses. So the people most affected by chance just happened to be East Hanny parish councillors. So they got together and decided we need to do something, and they formed a flood group. And like any good group, you have a mission statement which involved some objectives. And this first one, to reduce flooding to 1 in 25 years, is completely unrealistic. We had 6 floods in the last 2 years, but the rest of it is what we do. We help residents in both villages after flooding. We engage with the landowners where we can, and we are very much working with the East and West Hannay parish councils. We also worked, as you would hope, with the EA after the first rather disastrous floods. Let's just make this a bit bigger. And yes, we had a project which I was very pleased to learn was partly funded by the EA, and it had several prongs to it. The first one was to take from the mill sluice a layer of bricks. So that was 4 inches off the sluice, which reduced the water by 4 inches all the way upstream to the next obstruction, which was another mill. There was talk of reinstating a former route the water took across the fields, but water being water, it did that anyway. So there was no need to do anything more there. There were programs to remove a lot of rubbish from the brook, selectively reduce the weeds, which was all done with some help and guidance from the EA. But the biggest project was to create a bund along the bank where the water had overspilled, run across the fields, through the houses, into the roads. So we had the weed reduction. This is a bit extreme. We don't do this like this anymore. It was like this and got changed to this. Too much, but it did reduce the water level by 10 inches. So it does have a very dramatic effect. And the big project was to raise the bank, as I say, 300 millimeters. That's a whole foot in old money. And 120 tons of soil was spread along 150 meters of the brook. And this involved some mechanical equipment, but in the flood group are, or were at the time, people involved in the building trade, and everybody wanted to have a go on the dumper truck. The other thing that was done was to put some additional, vegetation along the bank. And these are coir mats with reeds already planted in them. And that covered 40 meters of the brook. And this was a major, major project. But it was done with the help of the EA, and principally they had the people available at the time and some funding. So that was good. We moved a lot of rubble and silt from the brook manually. It's all done by hand. People love getting in the water. Give them a pair of waders and they're happy. Sorry, this is leapt ahead. We did a lot of weed removal, not only in the main brook, but in subsidiary water channels. Water was distributed around the village through various side streams like this one, and they need to be kept clear. The biggest and most active thing we'd done in the early years was to pull trees out of the brook, mainly willows. There was a cricket bat willow plantation just upstream of one of the mills, which every time the wind blew, branches would go in, trees would fall over, and it was left to the flood group to go and get them out. We also have much larger tree trunks falling in the brook. And this is a bit more serious. And again, it's all done by hand, manually reducing the size to manageable pieces. And why do we do it? Well, we've got 2 mills in the village, and if anything that size gets anywhere near the mill mechanism, there is a big problem of damage. But we've discovered in our most recent flooding that our sewer pipe here is normally 3-4 feet above the water, but in the flood it traps debris, and when the flood gets even higher it disappears altogether. And if one of those big logs was to come down, it would smash that, and that's the main sewer from East Hanny to the Thames Water sewage works. We're working with Thames Water to try and get that fixed as quickly as we can. We spent a lot of time clearing the road drains and gullies. This used to be done on a 4-year, would you believe, a 4-year annual cycle. And they need doing twice a year at least. And to tell you how long it's been since some of them are done, this is one that's actually been tarmacked in. So in our toolkit, we've got hammers and chisels just to get the drain cover off and then dig out the rubbish inside. You'd be surprised. This I found growing very recently. It's the aeroplane roundabout in Wantage. Those tomatoes are in flower. 1st of July, I took that photograph. So maintenance is not done to the extent it should be. And this is us doing a lot of drain rodding, the culverts and the drains along the most commonly flooded roads. You'd be surprised what we pull out. Yes, it's mainly silt, leaves and litter, but also footballs. This perfectly sized football blocked that perfectly round hole. And we do have good support from the parish councils. This is from the East Hanny Parish Council, the gentleman on the left. And this is actually the chairman of West Hanny Parish Council, digging out the silt. Where do we fit together? Well, the East and West Hanny Parish Councils wisely got together and decided we needed an emergency team. And the flood group, as such, fits under that umbrella. But no matter where you look along this chart, it's the same people who help out every time, no matter what it is. Clearing ditches, clearing the snow, where there's a water pipe failure, water pressure failure, going to get water, bottled water and distributing it. Trees fall down and get cleared. And yes, we had a structure, we have a constitution, we have a committee, we have insurance, and above all, we have a bank account. And you can't do anything without a bank account. When we get threatened by floods, we have to act very quickly. So we have a call-out system using WhatsApp. It's one way, so we don't get any back chat. And the first thing we try and do is preserve the village hall and the community shop by putting up flood barriers. And when the water first begins to spill over, we've probably got 20 or 30 minutes to get these day or night in place. Then we can get out some hydrosnakes, sandbags around some vulnerable properties. The other area that where this gentleman on the left is laying sandbags, this is the bit that was raised up 10 years ago, and the water is again coming over it. And this is us putting down 2 or 3 layers of sandbags to try and keep the water in the brook. The morning after the flood, there's always cars that need removing from the various roads. You can see the extent to which they flood. It's an attraction for people. They come along and have a look. And we've had BMW after BMW ruined in the flooding around the villages. Other things we do is try and find out why things aren't draining. And we've uncovered a bizarre situation where there was a new development with proper drains, proper everything, and it piggybacked into a ditch that was in an unadopted road. So in 45 years, it's never been cleaned out. And this is where we were doing some investigation to find out where it all was. Annual weed and reed reduction, very important we do this, but we only take out a little bit each time, say a third at most, to keep the brook flowing. If it's too wide, the water is too slow and you get silt deposition. If you keep the water moving, it picks up the silt and it avoids too much. Big problem in the village is Botany Bridge in West Hanny, frequent cause of flooding. And as you can see, it was at one time badly overgrown with weeds and reeds at one end, silted up nearly to the top, but we got in there and dug a channel, sent the young small boys in and cleared it all out. And we did save at least one flood event from that. The other thing we're spending a bit of time doing, have done for 10 years now, is try and remove Himalayan balsam, an invasive plant, from the whole of Letcombe Brook. And we've been working from the railway that runs through Grove through to the north of Hanny. And we normally do that in June and July. And we are winning that battle. And yes, lots of people come and help, ladies, men in the flood group. It's not a men only thing. And I think that's my last slide. There's one more. It should pop up, but it hasn't.
Is there one more? Let's see.
Yes, there it is. We do have a website. It's the Hanny's Flood Group, but I draw your attention to the one at the bottom also, the Future Flood Resilience Group. This is a group of very learned people who are investigating the causing of flooding around here, and they've come up with some remarkable discoveries, and they are very happy and willing to talk to anybody. So that's it from me, Adrian.
Thank you so much, Clive. Really good presentation. A lot. I mean, this is really eye-opening in some ways in the reality of what it means to maintain those flood risk management assets, to keep the resilience going, not even increasing it, but just keeping it. So, I mean, this sewer main, whew, that's yeah, disaster in the making. So hopefully there's going to be a solution around that. But thank you so much for that. It's really good presentation. Now I would like to pass it on to our next speaker, and this is Emma Thompson, advisor on community resilience at the Environment Agency, and she's going to share a risk management authority's perspective on the guidance and how it will enable community maintenance for local flood risk management. Emma, all yours.
Thanks, Adrian. Gosh, that was really interesting, Clive. That was fascinating. Thanks very much for inviting me along today. Really good to be here. I'll start, if I may, just with a quick bit of background about the Environment Agency for those less familiar with the organisation. We're a Quango, an executive non-departmental public body. We're an advisor to government, an operator. We operate our own assets, and we're also a regulator of industry. We work to improve water quality, land quality, and air quality by tackling pollution. We work with business and industry to help them comply with environmental regulations. we know that a healthy and diverse environment enhances people's lives and contributes to economic growth. So it's better for all of us. As a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, we have a duty to work with partners to plan for and respond to incidents, and we like to work as much as possible with communities as well as the formal partners. In terms of flooding, we're responsible for managing flood risk from rivers and the sea and from reservoirs. Lead local flood authorities are responsible for managing the risk of flooding from surface water, from groundwater and ordinary watercourses, and they lead on community recovery. District councils also play a key part in planning local flood risk management and also carry out work on minor watercourses. Why we're supporting this project is because flooding is the most common natural hazard in Europe. It accounts for the largest number of casualties and the highest economic damages. The impacts caused by flooding affect people, property, infrastructure, and cause disruption to everyday lives. And this can last for sometimes a long time after a flooding has happened. Flooding is a natural process. We can never prevent it entirely, and we can never build our way out of it. Climate change, population growth, and other factors are increasing the likelihood and the potential impacts from flooding. People, properties, and communities that are better prepared respond better and recover more quickly from flooding. And that's why helping communities to adapt and improve their resilience has never been so important. Building resilience helps reduce the financial and human impacts of flooding that Clive and others have talked about. So our role in helping communities to build flood resilience is underwritten actually by the National Flood Risk Management Strategy that we published back in 2020. The roadmap later published in 2022 is also in line with wider government trajectories. Claire mentioned earlier on government policy and the government resilience framework and published in 2022, and there's an updated resilience strategy published more recently. The Environment Agency already supports communities to improve flood resilience in a number of different ways. We provide national information on long-term flood and coastal erosion risk using our flood maps on gov.uk. We provide information on what people can do to prepare themselves and their properties for flooding, such as signing up to flood warnings, installing property flood resilience measures. Our flood resilience engagement officers and our area-based teams work with communities at flood risk to raise awareness of risk, to encourage that sign up to flood warnings, and to support the development and testing of personal and community flood plans, and to provide resilience advice. And we do already and can support the establishment of flood groups or flood warden schemes, and we can provide information, advice and training. We issue flood warnings during a flood and forecast when flooding is expected so that people can be prepared and take action. And we provide information to areas at risk through our Check for Flooding service, which is live real-time data, which helps people, and our Floodline telephone service, which can help people during a flood. We can also share local information and advice through flood wardens and flood groups that we are in contact with. After a flood, our flood resilience engagement advisors and other colleagues will host or attend meetings and drop-ins to support flooded communities. And we also can help gather information about flood impacts and signpost people to support services and information. And Alan talked about those as well earlier on. So why this guidance is important is because there is a bit of a gap, unfortunately, between the reality and what we'd like to see. Despite all the things that we do to reduce the likelihood and impacts of flooding and to support community-led resilience building, we're still not where we want to be. People are not always aware of the risks that they face, and they don't always take action when they can. Research tells us there are various reasons for this. People don't always want to think about bad things that might happen to them. There might be a lack of awareness, there might be affordability issues, and people just sometimes have other priorities. if flooding is not imminent. But if you've ever watched Missy's Tale, and if you haven't, I strongly recommend it. You can just Google it, it's on YouTube. Brilliant production by Aardman Animations. But if you've ever watched that Mrs. Tale, you'll know that people who suffer most from flooding are the people it hits, the people in communities where flooding hits. So we would love to see more people doing more to understand their own risk and to know what they can do to help themselves and to feel able and confident to do so. We want people to act on warnings and advice when flooding happens. We want people to get involved in helping themselves and others prepare, helping to develop community flood plans, setting up or joining flood groups, volunteering at charities to support and help others, supporting vulnerable people in their own neighbourhoods, and supporting riparian owners, as others have already mentioned. And as we've said, this isn't about any risk management authority abdicating any responsibility, but this is people just helping themselves and being better prepared. And this is where really we hope the guidance will help. It will help provide communities and risk management authorities with the helpful hints and tips for working better together on activities. And it's about working together collaboratively that will really make a difference. Most of all, we really want people to feel confident to help themselves, and whilst being safe at all times, respecting the natural environment, making sure that they have the right permissions and are following the right guidance, and most of you all just working in partnership with the risk management authorities and others. So I have a few questions just for you to reflect on, all of you, and I welcome any feedback on these in the chat or the Q&A, or contact us afterwards. But it's always helpful for us to receive feedback from people who are out in communities, and we'd love to know what you think would help people to take more action to help themselves. Have you had any advice that you have found particularly useful in a community situation that we could learn from? And what is it that you think stops people from taking action, and how do you think we might overcome those barriers? So I'll leave those for you to reflect on and have a think about, and welcome any thoughts. And my last slide is just, I think the slides will be shared later, so you'll be able to access these links directly. But these are all the resources that I've mentioned to or referred to during my presentation, with information that you might find helpful later. And I'll stop there. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks a lot for that. Yes, we will indeed share the presentations and the slides after the meeting. So usually we do so on our website. This is a post event, so you will receive an email with the link to that, and you can access not only the slides, but also the recording. I've seen there's a note in there in the chat box about if you have to leave, the recording will be available for you after the meeting. Okay, I think we had a really amazing set of presentations from our speakers covering not only the different sides and content of the guidance documents themselves, but also talking about how those could be used in real life, and of course the need for such guidance when it comes to building flood resilience in a community. So we have now a bit of time for our Q&A session. So I will invite all the speakers to turn on their microphones and webcams again. And we've received a series of questions from the audience, and then I have a few of my own. So I will do a little bit of mixing and matching those questions. From the audience, if you still want to ask your questions, there's still plenty of time to do so while we're responding to the top ones. If you want to like the ones that you like, that will help me prioritize those. I will try to do a good job with marking the questions we've responded to into the responded categories, so we can focus on the ones that remain. Yeah, so let's get started. I think the first one is it's going to be a mix of the speakers. I think this question is probably going to be for Clive, but also for Jonathan. And this is with regard to who would be responsible for paying for liability insurance. There is a little bit of that in the guidance document, so Jonathan can talk a little bit about it. And then more practically, Clive, how did you handle your, your insurance? So maybe Jonathan, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start briefly, although Hanny's flood group have got the practical experience here. Yeah, the reality is that one of the reasons why flood groups need a bank account is because they have a certain number of expenses that they have to pay, and okay, they may be able to get some funding from parish council or other sources to support them, but essentially the group has got to pay for its own insurance. I think it's typically about 1,000 a year or something like that. Clive can confirm what he's paying at the moment, but it's that sort of order. The conservation volunteers, I think, set up a system through Zurich, but I mean, I'm sure it's not the only one that's available. Other solutions are available, as they always say, but I think that's the one that's most commonly adopted. Clive?
Yes, thank you. I inherited from my predecessor the insurance that we have, and it is with Zurich.
Yeah.
Do not ask me what's in it, because it's a 119-page policy, and I have no idea what the small print is in some bits of it. I did try one year to get an alternative quote, and I went to the NFU, and their quote was £1,200, which is more, or was more at the time, than we were receiving in income. So we are basically now funded by the 2 parish councils, which is great, and long may it last. Because in the early days, there was money around, and the people involved heard about grants being available, and that helped to buy equipment. It helped with some of the admin costs. When I became chairman, I suddenly realized we had no money coming in and lots going out. And that's when I went to the parish councils and basically said, if you want the flood group to exist, you're going to have to fund us. And roughly speaking, this is what our annual costs are, and insurance is a big chunk. And we're currently paying just under £400 a year.
Thank you for that, Clive. Really good answer. There was a sub-discussion related to these questions around, I don't know if any of you know the answer of that, but if you're a flood warden, so trained by county council, would it mean that you would be insured via this?
Emma, maybe Emma.
I can I mean, my answer to that is check with whoever's providing it, because it won't be a one size fits all. I mean, and the other sub questions in there about if you're, just because you're trained by somebody doesn't mean you're theirs, if you see what I mean. I mean, we provide training to people, but we don't run volunteers, we don't manage volunteers, and we don't insure people. So I would say whatever it, and the job description question is true here as well. That is by local agreement. There are all sorts of things, and the guidance talks, doesn't it, about the kind of activities that flood wardens might undertake, but they're not all going to do all of the same thing. There is no one stock job description and no one stock insurance document. So I would say check what the local arrangements are. And make sure that you're acting in it. I mean, we're always very tempted, aren't we? Because we want to help out, so we want to dive in and get started and get stuck in with helping things out. But actually, it's really important to have those sort of boundaries clarified. What are we covered for? What is the job description? What should I do? What should I absolutely not do? So I would say, and Jackie, lovely to see you on the call. But great to, I think we definitely take that back to whoever you're getting those instructions from, and check what your job description is and what you're insured for and what you're not, would be my advice.
Can I add a little bit more, which may be helpful? We are not insured for anybody under 16 years of age. And as a policy, I've not seen it written down in the insurance, but we do not use mechanical tools like chainsaws, which is difficult because the first thing people do is, I want to cut down trees, I've got a chainsaw. No, we don't do that. Everything's by hand.
Cool. Thank you, Clive. There's a lot of that into the guidance document in terms of what activities can be done from those type of groups and which ones require a more professional third party to come in and do those type of work as well. So thanks a lot. From the speakers, anything else on insurance? Otherwise, I'm going to move to the next question. All right, so I'm going to do the answer live and done. Here we go. Next one. I think, was it you, Clive, that mentioned that a lot of flooding is actually not reported? And so,
no, I didn't, but it is certainly
Alan
true.
did.
It was Alan. We've recently had, as I say, 6 floods in the last 2 years. And we came across the fact that it is not recognized as a flood unless it has been reported in a certain way, which is something to do with the number of houses flooded, businesses, maybe schools closed. And we had to complete what's known in Oxfordshire as a Section 19 report, which has been submitted. And it's not until that report has been answered that the county will even recognise there's been a flood. So you can have all the photographs and videos in the world, but unless you've done that form, it has not happened.
Thank you,
Which
Clive.
is
I think
bureaucracy.
yeah. Well, I think you answer actually a lot of the sub questions here. You mentioned Section 19. So there was a question about what is Section 19, and Jackie, thank you for responding. So it requires lead local flood authorities to investigate flood incidents when necessary based on each LFA's published flood investigation criteria. So this is what indeed triggers the response, I guess. Now going back to the header here in terms of the fact that flooding is not necessarily reported. Alan, since you mentioned it, do you want to say a word about it? The question here is about maybe some of the barriers for reporting is fear of impact on property value, yeah, so I think it would be good to hear a bit more about the NFF on that.
Yeah, I think Clive covered it really well, actually. I think there are mechanisms in terms of being able to report different types of flooding. The EA have got their floodline, for example. Local authorities, you can call their version of the floodline to be able to report. But as Clive mentioned, actually, you're not going to get much of a response out of local authorities unless you've submitted a Section 19, which kicks off the process for them to be able to engage. I think we're questioning there about what other mechanisms there are, whether there's GIS mechanisms. There are a number of GIS mechanisms that I'm aware of. I think the one that's most commonly used in local authorities in particular is called ArcGIS. ARCGIS. I think a lot of local authorities use those, but there are other mechanisms to be able to report as well. But I think the barriers that are outlined there, yes, they are some of the barriers to reporting. And also, often if there's flooding on highways that is seen as less impact, perhaps there's a do I really want to go through the bureaucracy that Clive mentioned there to be able to report that if it's going to be not impact on me as significantly as it might impact on others. So there are a number of barriers and concerns around that, and we need to continue to raise awareness, particularly with flood groups and into communities on a wider scale, to report flooding as and when it happens, so that we can be proactive in getting action moving forward.
Thank you, Alan. You touched on another questions around the tools. So cheap tools to help flood action groups monitor and report on flood-related assets. GIS system was mentioned, so thank you for bringing up ArcGIS, which is indeed an open source GIS software And then, is it fair to say, Emma, that there are resources that are compatible with GIS systems that could be used by local flood groups, flood maps or things like this that are available?
There might be. I'd need to check details. I've
Okay.
just dropped in the chat, the chat function. There's a gov.uk page on reporting flood incidents, and there's an agency hotline which is different from the floodline number. But there's information there about how to report flooding. I think, I mean, in terms of assets and quality of condition of assets and things, I think I'd really hope that where flood groups are operating, we'd have a really good relationship with them, and so that we could just talk to them. So that there may not be an actual tool for reporting and mapping and updating on condition, but that we might be able to have conversations about that. So so I think hopefully where flood groups do exist, and we know that obviously they don't operate everywhere, but where flood groups do exist, we really hope that you've got relationships with local EA personnel, and you can, if you've got any questions about it, and with the local authorities, because depending on whose asset it is, that you can report those and have those conversations about where there might be anything going wrong or looking out.
Thank you. Just before heading towards you, Jonathan, just a quick thing. I got my QGIS, sorry, my GIS mixed up. ArcGIS is a licensed software, indeed. However, QGIS, that's the one, which is the open source one that is free to use. And then I would say that probably a good thing to do is when starting on creating your own mapping tool, then talk to your local your councils and your LLFA to see if there are some shape files or layer files that are available that they can use for your own mapping tool. Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we tend to think these days, don't we, always about, what's available online, and all that information is great. But I would say there's nothing can really replace walking over the ground with with representatives from the group and from the Risk Management Authority. I mean, there's a lot of very practical exchange that's prompted by just looking at stuff together. And just following up on Emma's comment, the Environment Agency and others have asset management tools, but then they're designed for internal management. They're not really designed for external use. But there's a lot of information often contained there, which I'm sure the relevant bits could be released to local groups if they needed that information.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think there's, again, I come back to the relationships where we've got relationships. We can talk about what data we can share, what data we have, and there is obviously a certain amount of open data, but other things that we have that may not be so open. But I mean, I've got personal experience dating years ago where we shared particular information with a particular local group in order to enable collaborative planning. So I'm sure that's a possibility and should definitely be explored with local staff.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of the kind of data that's now available is from surveys called LIDAR, LIDAR, where there's an increasing level of accuracy of ground level information now becoming available, which could be really very helpful in conjunction with local knowledge in planning.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, next question. So going back to Clive, this is some very impressive work that you did. Did you have to worry about downstream flood risk?
Yes. The major project where the bank was raised took quite a long time from initiation to actually being done because of the various hurdles that had to be gone through with the EA, because you cannot do anything that increases the flood risk downstream, and flood risk assessments are needed, and you also need ecology assessments, and the list gets bigger and bigger. So yes, you do have to worry about it, because all you're doing is pushing the problem to somebody else.
Thank you, Clive.
You could get me on a soapbox here if you're not careful.
Okay, one more question for you actually, which is a mixed of a question from Jacqueline and a question from me, but it's about the volunteers. When you do this work, is it mainly at the weekends or during the working week? So that's the first part of the question. And the second one is the equipment that you have for going into the water, like the life jackets and whatnot. If these were funded through collaboration with the EA, for example, for the Brook project that you mentioned. So 2 questions here.
As far as I know, the equipment was not funded from the EA and still isn't. We are lucky in that we have enough support from the 2 parish councils, and because of the work we do, various organisations within the villages, like the parish magazine, it's not profit making, but they get a lot of revenue from advertisers. They give us grants. The church has given us grants, but that tends to be for specific bits of equipment. So if we go to them and ask, can we have, well, we went to the East Tanny Parish Council and they gave us a trailer. When I say gave us, we had to do all the legwork, of course, go and get it. But we were able to purchase through them a trailer. What we do in terms of working parties, we have a monthly working party on the 3rd Saturday of every month. So that is fixed. And we've got one coming up on Saturday. If anybody wants to join us, very welcome. And with the system of the call out for an emergency, they don't always happen at weekends. They don't always happen in the daylight. So we've got a WhatsApp calling system, and then people turn out. We send a message to say, what's happening? There's flooding. Get to the hall, please, because we've got to put the barriers up quickly. That's usually the starting point. And thereafter, people turn up, and then we can deploy here and there wherever needed. The difficulty, well, yeah, once we've done that, we've got walkie-talkie radios. Most of what we're doing is the equipment. It has been funded over the years. We still got funding during lockdown. So we didn't have the working parties because we couldn't meet. But if there was a tree in the brook, we went and got it out. And don't ask me how. 1 or 2 people would go and assess what there was to do, and if it was an imminent threat and couldn't wait, and we just deal with it. So we do have occasional, if you like, out of hours working parties, because most of us are retired. So we have time in the week, and we've been doing a lot of surveying following all the floods, working out what was happening, where the water was coming from, why it wasn't contained, and that just happens naturally during the week.
Okay, thank you, Clive. Great response. A question maybe for Claire, since it was mentioned in your presentation, but what is your definition for social value? I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on that.
I think it was Alan who mentioned social value. Actually, sorry, I don't know.
Good answer.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Sorry, Alan.
Yeah,
Again.
No,
It's fine. I'm in the hot seat here. Social value, for every organisation, it means something probably slightly different. I think from the NFF perspective, social value to us would mean positive and lasting benefit for the people, the communities, the environment. I think if you were to put social value in a strapline for us, that would probably be what it would look like. But underlying all that, I think the empowerment of communities through Flood Action Group, engagement is a benefit of social value can provide. Helping people to understand and influence decisions is a social value impact. I guess providing long-term confidence that a solution is going to stick, and the process is open and transparent is also an element of social value. So there's what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of versions of what social value would mean to us, but I think the overriding thought for me is that any solution, regardless of the type of flooding that happens or the solution that's brought, it provides confidence that a long-lasting solution is in place that would benefit people and communities.
Thank you, Alan. Any more regarding social value from the speakers? Okay, so we move on to the next one. Let's see. I think there was a question, yeah, actually not in the chat, but in the not in the Q&A, but in the chat, which is what is the best way for a community flood group to engage with riparian owners to ensure that the watercourse is maintained? So I wonder if this is a mix of Jonathan, because we have some of it in the guidance, and Clive, because you're probably done that before.
Mm. Well, and I would also like Emma to comment on this, because the it might be better for you to talk first, Emma, because there's recently been updated government guidance on the responsibilities of riparian owners. I think it may even be in the list of links that you provided at the end of your presentation, Emma.
Yes, I'm just trying to find the question. Sorry, what was it again? I'm just trying to find it in the list of questions, Adrian.
It's how to engage with riparian owners.
Oh, it was engaging with, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I think the starting point is for riparian owners to understand their responsibilities, and that's not always people maybe don't even understand what a riparian owner is, and that's one of the things we do set out very clearly in the guidance, explaining what a riparian owner is, what their responsibilities are, because we're having to start from the scratch that the community isn't responsible at law for anything, and it's only where the riparian owners don't have the money or they don't have the resources or the ability, that this is where the community group can be so helpful in working with them, because riparian owners can be very mixed. It could be a large landowner that have got machinery equipment that they can do stuff with, but it may also be a little old lady who has got a 20-meter or 10-meter length of brook in her back garden or her front garden, and and her doing, even paying somebody else to do something just over that little length doesn't make any sense, because it's coordinated action over the whole length of that particular part of the watercourse that's what's needed there.
Clive, yeah.
Oh, God.
Shall I add something?
Yeah, please do.
If riparian owners actually did what they were supposed to do, there's absolutely no reason for us to exist as a flood group. And one of the problems is in the purchasing of property or land, nowhere in that process is anything explained about riparian responsibilities. So if you're buying a house with a ditch out the front, nobody ever tells people that's yours to maintain. Keep clear and pick up dead bodies and litter, because that is the responsibility. And until that's built into the planning process, this is going to get worse and worse, because villages like ours are becoming more and more urbanized. So you've got people moving from big towns to live in the country with no idea what happens in the country or used to happen. if you think about it, people years ago used to keep the front of their houses tidy, the gardens, the ditches clear, the hedges trimmed. Now the council do it, only they don't, because that doesn't exist. And this is where the education of riparian rights and responsibilities needs a bigger and better push.
Thank you, Clive. All right, I think I have another question for you, Clive, which is very much related to some aspects of your presentation. And this is about how common is flooding still exacerbated by historic modifications to watercourses, like old mills, now forgotten or no longer maintained. And then there is a sub-question for Emma. Has anyone or the EA examined and have a handle on this across the country? Question mark.
It's not so much the old stuff, it's the new. I'm principally talking about Letcombe Brook here. It's 13 kilometres long, starts up in the hills with the springs feeding water into the watercourse. And when it gets to Wantage and Grove, which are 3 miles up the road from us, there is huge amounts of development going on. Yes, we've got to have new houses. I'm not going to go down that route, but we've had 2,500 new houses, possibly 5,000 more people living. 200 acres of agricultural land has gone out of use. Somebody mentioned SUDs earlier on. A lot of the developments with SUDs aren't man enough for the job, and they aren't able to cope with what's going on. We've had recently a SUDS failure in a development in Wantage, and the way round it was to dig a trench under the road and pour the water straight into the brook. In Grove, there's an airfield having 10,000 houses built on it. All that is water from that is pouring off into the Letcombe Brook. And then after that, you've got Thames Water, water treatment works. It ran for 750 hours last year at 700 tons an hour into the brook. So we've got all this water coming down to us, in addition to what was in the past an area with 2 or 3 mills on it. The mills themselves do not appear to be holding up water. It's things like weirs, which are maybe not maintained, but we don't have them. It's only a short bit of river here, and Letcombe has a big weir that's got lots of silt behind it, and there's talk of trying to remove the weir, but all that's going to do is let loads more silt down the brook. And years ago, farmers in the winter months used to get their labourers to clear out the river and the ditches. Doesn't happen now. It's a man it's a contractor with a big machine, comes one day a year. Hedges get cut, but the brash doesn't get picked up. It gets dropped in the ditches. People cutting their grass, the grass cuttings go in the ditch. And it's this education that really has to make people aware of what responsibilities there are. Things could be made a lot better, but they're getting worse and worse. I mean, 6 floods in 2 years when there hasn't been some for 40 years. Mm-hmm. Something's changed, and we've just lost so much land to absorb water.
Thanks, Clive. Yeah, really good response. Jonathan, you had your hand up for a second. Do you want to add something in there?
Well, I mean, in response to the question about mills, and I mean, obviously, historically, a lot of our watercourses have had control structures, whether they be weirs or whether they be mill structures put on them. And at the time, it all worked reasonably sustainably. I mean, what Clive has flagged up is the fact that, there are other drivers now which are probably as important, including basically increased inputs into the watercourse. And so I think isolating mill structures as a single cause is probably not a sensible way of looking at it, and you have to look at each watercourse in its own rights.
Thanks, Jonathan. Another question, which is about waste management. So we have a strong emphasis on waste management in the guidance document, recognizing that this is a critical maintenance bit. Now, Clive, you mentioned all the removal that you do, cutting vegetation, trimming, removing logs, cutting down trees. What do you do with all the waste collected?
Most of the trees get removed from farmland, and when it's dried out, the farmer usually gets rid of it, usually burning it. Litter goes into the local refuse collections. Where possible, we sort it and recycle, but usually recycling is supposed to be clean, washed things, but when the gin bottles from Grove come floating down, they're pretty filthy. So it just gets put in the landfill.
Thanks, Clive. And what about the invasive species that you remove? Same thing?
It's no, because if you pull Himalayan balsam out, the best thing you can do is leave it to rot.
Okay. And you said that you were winning the battle.
Sorry?
You said that you were winning the battle against.
Well, we hope so, because we've got rid of it from the centre of the village. That photograph I showed you at the end was by Lower Mill Bridge. There's very little there now. We work closely with the Letcombe Brook project, and they some years ago took up the challenge, I think, to try and remove Himalayan balsam from the entire length of Letcombe Brook, and we're working further upstream from us. But we've been working 10 years on it, running from the railway in Grove through the village and the farmlands on north and south of the village. And that's what we're doing this weekend. We had a session last month in just north of the village, and now we're going to the next bit towards the end where the Letcombe Brook joins Childry Brook before it flows into the Ock.
Thanks, Clive. All right, one question for Alan. There is something in there about the helpline and the NFF and what is available for people that are suffering from floods on how they can report from this. And I think it also leads to how the National Flood Forum can facilitate partnership between the communities affected by flood and the risk management authorities.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the helpline is often when people are flooded, they jump immediately onto the internet and look up flooding organisations, and the National Flood Forum pops up with our helpline number there. It is staffed 24/7 by Jean, who's quite active in the Q&A chat. Thanks, Jean, for the messages that you've put in there and the responses that you've added to everything in there. As I said, Jean gets over, or the team there get over 1,000 calls every single year. In terms of how that links into reporting, the advice from Jean, if required, will be, and Jean's team obviously, will be where to go to be able to report. We wouldn't necessarily do the reporting on behalf of somebody who contacted us. We'd point them in the right direction as to where to go and what action to be able to take. What was the second question, Adrian? Sorry.
That was how the National Flood Forum can help create relationship between community groups and risk management authorities.
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Flood Forum, through our flood action groups, empowers communities to be able to contact their their flood risk management authorities through a process, and that is providing them with the tools and means to be able to do so, but also for them, for us to be able to help the communities understand where the flood risk management authority is coming from, as well as the other way around. So for us, it's about translating the technical information as it comes downstream from the flood risk management into communities and helping communities understand where the flood risk management authorities are coming from in terms of what they're doing, and actually sitting in a room in what we call a multi-agency meeting that often has the water authorities, the environment agencies, sometimes modelers and academics, all sat around a table together in a community centre usually, to be able to engage with each other on a basis that allows people to come up with solutions and ideas and bat ideas around as to what solutions can come from those. So there's a number of ways in which we do it, but sitting down with the community first in a flood action group and understanding their perspective and empowering them to be able to talk to flood risk management authorities is really, really important. And then we get that that flood action group into a position where they can sit comfortably with the environment agency, the local authority, the flood risk managers, and be able to sit and have a dialogue around what's happening. Particularly, often the flood risk authorities come into it with, there's been a flood, so we want to solve that problem. What I think Clive will tell you, amongst others, would be that helping flood risk management authorities to understand the trauma that flooded people have been through, and the emotional and mental health issues that flooding can often have, is a really important part of helping the flood risk management authorities understand what's going on.
Thanks a lot for that. Okay, I think we have time for just one quick more questions, which will be a mix of a question in the chat, which is about if the documents have been released. Yes, they have been released. The next slide that I'm going to share once we're done with the Q&A will have a QR code for you to access it and download it. But if you head over to CIRIA.org, you will see it in there as well, and you can download those for you to use. And then I would say maybe a quick question, bringing it back to the guidance document. So this is probably for Jonathan, is maybe a bit of a reminder on the consultation process that happened when we created and drafted this guidance. If you want to say just a few words, Jonathan, that would be great.
Yeah, okay. So we were obviously aware of some groups in advance of the meeting. I mean, I've known Clive for many years, for example, but we used the National Flood Forum were very helpful in advertising the project and a questionnaire that we sent out, so that we went through that initial process where we sent out a questionnaire, and we got responses, I think about 70 responses to that, which was really enormously helpful. And then from that, depending on various criteria, we then selected a few groups for more detailed interviews, and got more information from groups as part of that process as well. So that was all that was really helpful, and I'd like to express my thanks to all those who participated in that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we also had a series of workshops, and one of them was very interactive and super useful, with 40 plus representatives from local community groups who helped us actually shape and vet the principles that were used to build the guidance document. All right, I'm going to stop here. We are about to finish this webinar. Just a reminder, this will be indeed available online. Now the slides are coming up. So, okay, I would like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise to this webinar. This has been really, truly informative and super interesting. Thank you, Claire, Jonathan, Alan, Clive, and Emma. And then thank you for all of you who joined the webinar. I think we had like 160 people at some point, which is a really good number. So thanks a lot for this. let's go to the next slide. Yes, so you will have, there's going to be a CPD poll that's going to pop up on your screen. If you want to respond to this one, that would be great. And while you do so, I'd like to move to the next slide. So we can, here we go. So this is the QR code to access the publication. If you want to give it a try, you can scan it from your phone. Or once again, you can head over to ciria.org, find the bookshop, and you will see the guidance document there. This is free to download. You just have to create an account with CIRIA if you don't have one already. And then once you've done so, you will receive a link to download the 3 documents as a package. Please spread the word around you. We really want those documents to be used as much as possible. We believe that those are are definitely useful for community groups, RMAs, and anyone interested in the topic of maintaining flood risk management assets. If you would like to do a partnership with us to amplify the messages and to make sure that these documents go into the right forums, the right audience, please send me an email afterward and we can coordinate for that. All right. Thank you so much for everyone. I think we managed to go through a good number of questions. There were several more that we couldn't respond, but these were all extremely useful. So thank you for that. And I would like to, once again, thank you for being there. And I will stop the webinar here. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.